Good morning. This is Rich Szerman with the Real Estate Fix with Rich Szerman on your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 FM, AM 1220. I got some good stuff today. We've got a really good show today. It's got a lot to fit in. First of all, we have Lou Esbin, bankruptcy attorney extraordinaire, who's going to be our special guest today. We're going to do a little bit of a market update before that. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's keeping housing off the market and where the market's going to go. Market has not changed a whole heck of a lot in the last week. Interest rates came down a tiny bit, despite the Feds raising them last week. But the biggest problem we're having in the market at the moment, we've talked about this a couple times, is affordability. Affordability is the key word because houses are just becoming less affordable than ever before. Not that it was a problem, not that it wasn't a problem before, but this has made it worse. So, and we're also still in the middle of what I like to call, I've been getting a lot of feedback on this, and I love it, so please keep it coming, on the dead cat bounce. I love that economic expression. I've gone all these years reading all these economic papers, book after book after book. First time I'd ever heard that expression. I love it. Dead cat bounce. So if I'm using it too much, forgive me. What a dead cat bounce means is that it's based on the premise of the idea is that even a dead cat will bounce if dropped from a high enough height. Now, as it means applied to economics is that when a stock or anything of value devaluates suddenly, it will tend to bounce up a little bit just before it dies. And that's kind of what's going on with the housing market. We're in the middle, or about a month into, what is essentially a dead cat bounce for the real estate market. Housing prices have actually come up a little bit, but that has more to do with availability and affordability than anything else. So let's talk about kind of why that's going on. And the biggest reason is that there just aren't as many houses on the market. And the reason for that primarily is because of the interest rates we're coming out of. I mean, basically it goes something like this. Really, what we would consider the era of lower than ever mortgage rates is over. It's not going to come back. We're not going to see, sub 4, 3.5 type interest rates probably anytime soon, probably in our lifetimes. So that's essentially over. And it's too bad, but it's been replaced by, housing rates that are hovering around 6.5%. Now, obviously, the difference between 3.5 and 6.5 is 3 points, and it's rather dramatic. And that's what's causing a lot of people to keep, because right now, even though interest rates are down from their peak at 7.3% earlier this year, which is good, so they're now back down to about 6.5, according to good people at Goldman Sachs, well, I say good people because I say that a lot, but I don't know that they're necessarily good people, but the people at Goldman Sachs, 99% of the borrowers have mortgage rates currently lower than 6%, 28% locked-in rates below 3%, and 72% locked-in rates below 4%. And that jives with the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac numbers because they're telling us that 70% of all homeowners in the United States have interest rates right now below 4%. Now, what does that translate into? Let's do some what ifs, and you'll see pretty readily what this means. If you took out a $700,000 mortgage, and let's say you got a 7% rate, now you could probably get about 6.5, but let's say you got a 7% rate. Maybe that's a credit problem or something. So $700,000 mortgage at 7% rate, your payment, not including taxes and interest, $700,000 would be $4,657 a month, which is not that far out of line with the Santa Clarita Standard. So that's the number we use, but $4,657 a month. Now contrast that to the exact same amount, $700,000 borrowed, but with a 4% interest rate, $3,342 a month. That's a difference of $1,315 per month. So that's over $12,000, $13,000, almost $14,000 a year. So that's why people aren't selling. And if you got an even lower rate, if you got a 3% rate, your payment is $2,951 a month. So think about that. 3%, $2,951 a month. 4%, $3,342 a month. Or 7%, $4,657 a month. So that's the difference between a 3% mortgage and a 7% mortgage on a $700,000 mortgage amount is over $3,000 a month. It literally doubles. So that's why people aren't selling. I'm a pretty good example of this. So are lots of my neighbors. I have an interest rate just above 3.5% because I did a refinance. My payment is extremely affordable. If I were to send, I'm a good candidate. I'm a move-up buyer. Kids of a certain age, all that good stuff. So what I should be doing, what the demographics tell you I should be doing, choosing myself personally here, is I should be selling my current house and buying the bigger, better house. I don't dislike my house. It's lovely. I like my neighborhood. I like my neighbors. I'm very fond of my house. But statistics sakes, I've been in that house for 8 years now. I should be one of those people who should be selling that house to buy a bigger, better one. But my problem is my payment is less than $3,000 a month. If I were to buy another house, I would spend more money, and my payment would be closer to $7,000 or $8,000 a month. That's crazy. I mean, that's just it becomes untenable. So I'll stay in the house I'm at, like a lot of people, and that's why there are so few houses on the market. And really, what this causes, because again, supply and demand, even though demand is down, because there are fewer people out there buying houses, there are fewer houses on the market. The entire market has shrunk by about 33%. There are a third fewer buyers in the market right now. There are a third fewer houses on the market right now. And that's really what's really kind of firing up what I like to call, or this dead cat bounce, was a little momentary bop in housing prices. That's really what's doing it. They're basically, you got to kind of think of it this way. When it comes to real estate in our area, really Southern California in general, you got to kind of think of it as three distinct markets. There's the luxury market, which in our area is everything above about 1.2 million. There's the move-up market, which is everything from about 700,000 to about 1.2 million. And then there's the first-time home buyer market. And that's everything from whatever you can get a house for up to about 600, 700,000. So depending on your first-time buyer. So there's some overlap. But anyway, first-time home buyers are really right now what's firing up the market. The luxury market is way down, way down. The good news is there's better pricing you can get on houses in the luxury market right now, stuff above 1.2 million, because there are a little bit better discounts to be found despite our little bounce here. But that part of the market is just, it's not where it needs to be. So if you have a great big expensive home, you're probably going to want to sit on it for a number of reasons. It might be interest rate, it might be a lot of things, but your prices are also down and they're just not selling. There aren't buyers out there. There are some, but they're very, very few and far between for the luxury market. So that's why that market's kind of stagnant. The move-up market, which is usually the meat of the market in your normal suburban, outside a city kind of area, which is most of Southern California, that market is also dried up because of what we just talked about. Again, I'm a good example. I should be in the middle of that market, so I'll use myself as an example. I am not selling my house and getting rid of my 3.5% interest rate. I would be nuts to do so. I'm sorry when I refinanced, I didn't take more money out because of the lower interest rate. Money at 3.5% is pretty good. You're not going to see that again. So that's why the move-up market is essentially stagnating. And that leaves us with the first-time homebuyer market. And God bless the first-time home buyers. Boy, I love them. And the market loves them as well because that's really who's out there. The problem for them, though, is because there's so few houses on the market, even with fewer buyers, we're still seeing multiple offers on anything under about 700,000. Multiple offers because there's just so little inventory out there. That's just kind of the way it is. So the good news is, if somebody, started a radio show about 2 to 3 months ago and told you, hey, now's a good time to do these things because there might be a little bit of a bounce in the market, interest rates are going up, they're going to curry the market going forward, and you actually listened and you chose to buy a house, you're in pretty good shape. Or if you listened and you actually chose to sell a house, you're also in pretty good shape. You're still going to be in good shape for the next 30 to 60 days, maybe even 90, but that's when all bets come off because that's where the wheels are going to come off the wagon, I feel, because we're not normalizing. Unless the interest rate drops down to about 5.5%, that's kind of the magic number. Unless we normalize there, we're going to continue to have problems in the housing market. This little bounce we're in is going to go away because there are only so many first-time buyers. And the other thing you need to consider is those first-time buyers are not fueling second-time buyers, move-up buyers, in other words. Because usually what happens is a first-time buyer comes in, they buy a house, the person who sells that house goes on and buys the next house. What we're seeing, and again, why inventory is so low, is in the first-time buyer market, the sellers on the first-time buyer market are leaving the state, retiring. A lot are retiring. A lot of them are not buying another house. They're going to a rental for a couple of years, or because they have to, or because they need to. So we're not seeing a lot of move-up buyers come out of the first-time buyer market, and this has not been helpful. This has not been helpful at all to the real estate market. I mean, if you're in real estate like me and lots of other people, what you'll find is that the entire market across the board has shrunk fully by a third. There are just 33% fewer houses selling. There are 33% people buying. There are fewer loans being made. The refinance market is all but over. These are difficult times in the market. So we are in a bit of a pickle. There's a nice little median ground right now that everybody can take advantage of, that you should. There's a little bit of a bounce right now that works for the buyers and sellers, so it's definitely something you should take advantage of. So again, I've been saying this. I know it's self-serving because I am a realtor, but if you are going to sell a house in the next year, do it now. If you're going to buy a house in the next year, do it now. You are not going to be helped by waiting. When I say this, buyers come back to me. They say, well, Rich, you're saying the prices are going to drop. Yeah, they are. Prices are going to come down about another 5% before the end of this year. And if the debt ceiling crisis doesn't get resolved, it's going to be a lot worse than that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Prices are going to come down a little bit more. Now, they're not right now because they're going up this little bounce we had, but they will come back down. I still think by the end of the year, prices are going to be down about another 5%. But if you're a buyer and you're saying, well, I'll wait till the end of the year when the prices are down a little bit more, if you're a cash buyer, it makes perfect sense. Do that. But if you are getting financed, don't do that, because I'm very, very concerned that the interest rate is going to be above 7, possibly above 8 by the end of this year. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I like being wrong about these things when I predict gloom and doom. It's much better to be wrong than be right when you're talking about how the market may come off the rails. But I want to move on a little bit. I want to talk about why I think the interest rate is going to do what I think it's going to do. We watch the news. If you watch nightly news or if you pay attention to the news at all, I'm sure you've heard about the spending crisis, the debt ceiling limit that's going on in Washington right now. And what the basic idea is, we as the United States have agreed on a budget. That budget has been put into play. But like always happens with budgets in the United States, the cost, the paying of our bills, requires us to raise the debt ceiling. Now, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea is kind of a separate argument, because right now, those bills are due. We've got essentially until June 1st. If the debt ceiling issue is not resolved by June 1st, let me just tell you what some of the projections we're getting. The good people at Zillow are saying that if the federal government defaults on the debt, mortgage rates will climb. Skyrocket's another good word for that. Home sales will plummet, and housing market that's already unaffordable for many potential buyers will get much farther out of reach. It's going to be rough. And this is just the real estate market. This also affects credit cards, everything else. Because in this little battle between one side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle, whichever team we have to seem to be on these days, it's going to damage all of us. I think being on a team is kind of useless when it comes to this kind of stuff, because whatever your views are about other things, maybe it's gun control for you, maybe it's abortion, whatever it is, great, fine, whatever. But when it comes to the economics of this, messing around with the full faith and credit of the United States of America is extraordinarily bad and will cause catastrophes everywhere. For example, Zillow just released this report Wednesday. Let me quote from it a little bit. If for some reason the debt ceiling doesn't get worked out, Zillow is telling us, and they're not the only ones, we're also getting this from a couple of other indexes, this is just the most concise, most current, that the 30-year fixed mortgage rate will likely peak at 8.4% in September. So think about that. A mortgage rate of 8.4%. We saw the market going from 10% gains per year to now to dropping 10%, and I still think it's going to drop another 5%, because the interest rate went from 4.5% to 6.5% in the course of about 8 weeks. And it cratered the market. Imagine what happens if the market goes from 6.5%, we're already talking about affordability and the houses aren't affordable enough, and that's what's hurting the market, and can't get buyers into houses, and the houses aren't on the market. Imagine what happens if the market goes from 6.5% to 8.4%. That'd be approximately 2 percentage points higher than the current rates. 30-year fixed mortgage last week was about 6.35%. Thursday, according to Fannie Mac, it's down about 0.71%, so it's not a whole heck of a lot, of about 7%, less than a point, in other words. But mortgage rates tend to be linked, and I want to explain why this happens this way. Here's why, if we default, why the interest rate will spike. Mortgage interest rates tend to be linked with the yield on the 10-year Treasury bond, which right now is at 3.44%. If Treasuries go from a safe haven to an asset with some default risks, in other words, if it goes from a place because you can always count on the United States. You put your money in a bond in the United States, you'll get your money out. You put your money in a bond in another country, might work out, might not. Kind of depends on the country and the stability of their economic system. But the United States economic system is the gold standard around the world. It is the one that everybody depends on. If you've ever flown or gone anywhere internationally, you can get off a plane in pretty much any country in this world with a pocket full of US dollars, and they will still accept them. If you try to do that with other denominations or other currencies, you will not have as much luck. I've been lucky enough to do some traveling in my life. I've been all over the world, and I will tell you, you can spend US dollars anywhere on this planet. That will not be true if this continues. So anyway, mortgage rates tend to be linked to the 10-year Treasury note, 10-year bond note. If Treasuries go from a safe haven with assets to some default risk, or a risk is delayed payment, the price will go down and the yield will increase, pushing up mortgage rates and all other consumer and business financing that's benchmarked against the Treasury. Everything is benchmarked against the Treasury, so that's a big deal. Rising risk in Treasuries would translate to rising costs for home buyers. That is the bottom line. If a deal cannot be made, the risk will increase. Investors will pull their money out of the bond market rather than looking at it as a safe haven, and the reality will be that will translate into rising costs for home buyers. It's just that simple. Zillow is projecting about a 22% increase overall. That includes the interest rate, cost to buy, everything else. So default would absolutely warp interest rates. It would increase unemployment and economic uncertainty. Housing prices, as we talked about, they're saying housing prices are going to drop an additional 5%. That's on top of the 5% I'm predicting. So I'm thinking you're looking at another 10% drop if they don't get this worked out. There'd be Zillow's projection, 700 fewer existing home sales between July and December of this year. The projection noted at the lowest point there would be 23% fewer existing home sales. Now that's on top of the 33% we already don't have. that would be almost a 50%, over a 50% drop in available houses and houses that get sold. There are two numbers you need to pay close attention to in real estate. You need to pay attention to the volume, and you need to pay attention to the price. Everybody thinks about pricing. Everybody thinks about what a house is worth. And that's very important. I'm not saying it's not, but you also have to pay attention to volume. How many houses are being sold? If there are 6 houses on your block and 4 of them are for sale right now, well, you know what? Your house price is going down. If there's only one of them for sale right now, you got a shot at the house price going up. Of course, it depends on what the buyers are doing and if if the buyers are in the market, but right now they are. But really primarily in the first-time buyer market. So we're seeing whenever markets get unhinged between those 3 markets, the luxury market, the move-up market, and the first-time buyer market, when those things don't all work in concert the way they're supposed to, when one section of it goes high and the others remain low or stagnant, it creates disasters. It creates pressure on the market as a whole that only manifests itself one way, and that is usually in some sort of a disaster or some sort of a collapse. Now, I don't think we're looking at a collapse a la 2008, but we are definitely looking at choppy waters ahead. We have been for a while. And like I said, the best thing you can do with any of this stuff is just be aware of which way the wind is blowing. Yes, it is true that lots of houses are not coming on the market because people have great interest rates and they don't want to sell them. That's just a truth. There's nothing you can do about that, but be aware of it. Depending on where you are, whether you're a first-time buyer, a move-up buyer, a luxury buyer, or where you kind of are in it, just know that segment of the market. Because knowing what that segment of the market is doing and understanding how it's going to function will give you the ability to have the information to do your best job, to get your best work out of it. As a realtor, I pay attention to these things very, very carefully. When somebody says they want to sell a house, obviously you look at what comparables are for a mile, 2 miles around their house, but then you also have to look at what is coming. What does the market look like in the next city over? What does the market look like in the rest of the state? What does it look like nationally? I mean, if we default on this debt, it will be catastrophic. It will be absolutely catastrophic for the real estate market. Now, apparently what has happened, there's supposed to be a meeting today between both sides, and that got pushed back because they're having staff work do it, and we're supposed to think that's a good thing. I don't know that calms markets when the President of the United States and the head of the Republican Party are supposed to meet, and they decide to put it off for a week, and then they tell us all it's a good thing. I'm not there. I don't know. I don't handle these sorts of things. That's out of my pay grade, but I hope they're right. I really do, because if we get into this silly political nonsense and we default on our debt, if we tell the rest of the world, sorry, the United States is not paying its bills this month, it is going to be a catastrophe. Now, my particular corner of the world is the economics of the housing market, and I will tell you it will be a catastrophe for the housing market. The interest rate will spike, houses will drop, housing prices will drop, it will be very, very bad. So let's all just say a little prayer that Washington gets it all worked out, and they choose not to do that because, boy, if it goes that route, it's going to be problematic. So if it does go that route, nice little lead in here, we're going to be seeing a lot more bankruptcies as well. And to that end, we have a special guest in studio today. I'm very excited he's here today, named Lou Esbin. He's a preeminent bankruptcy attorney. He's fantastic. We worked together for many, many years. He's tells story after story about clients that he saved, and we've kept their houses and stuff. Absolutely fantastic. There's nothing he doesn't know about this. So we're going to take a little break. We're going to hear from some of our sponsors. We're going to pay some bills. And when we come back, we're going to have Lou Esbin live in studio. If you have any questions, feel free, as always, to call in. Again, if you have any questions, send them on the internet. It's always good. You can reach me at thefixwithrich at gmail.com. Again, that's thefixwithrich at gmail.com. Please feel free to leave me emails on that all the time. Happy to answer them. Again, it's thefixwithrich at gmail.com. Or you can always call me on my cell phone. This is literally my personal cell phone number. 66. Please don't call while I'm on the air. I can't take a call while I'm on the air. My personal cell phone number is 661-714-1400. I'll repeat that again, 661-714-1400. I answer that number 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except when I'm with another client or I'm on the air in the radio show. But if you call me at that number, I will call you back. If you text me, I will answer your text and I will answer your questions. So let's pay some bills. Let's hear from some sponsors, and we're back. We'll have Lou Esbin. My name is Rich Szerman. This is the Real Estate Fix with Rich on your hometown station, KHTS 98.1. Welcome back. You tuned into Rich Szerman, the Real Estate Fix with Rich on your hometown station, KHTS 98.1 AM 1220. Thank you for listening. We have a special treat today for you guys. We have Lou Esbin, preeminent bankruptcy attorney, in studio with us today. So we're going to answer some bankruptcy questions that come up a lot. As you guys know, I do a lot of foreclosure defense. We do a lot of, again, fixing people's real estate problems, and foreclosure comes up an awful lot. We've been doing that sort of thing for free for many, many years. And we've proud to say we've kept, I think we totaled it up the other day, we're over 3,000 people we've kept out of foreclosure now in the roughly 30 years we've been doing that. So that's a lot of people still in their houses. We're awfully proud of that. But I want to talk to Lou specifically. First of all, thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I want to talk to Lou about bankruptcy because we're getting a lot of questions, as the economy is kind of softening and people are getting in more and more trouble, as the banks are kind of getting back online and the number of foreclosures is going up, we chart these in LA County pretty religiously. And last month there were about 850 foreclosures, or NODs, the first part of a foreclosure, filed in LA County. This month we're going to be well over 1,000. So that's a 15% increase, and it's going to continue to get worse as the number of foreclosures. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is we get these bankruptcy questions all the time. So I thought I shouldn't be answering them anyway because I'm not a bankruptcy attorney. I have a bad habit of doing. I always say I'm not an attorney, but I know the answer. And the reason I know the answer to a lot of the bankruptcy questions is because I've learned it from Lou. And if I don't know the answer, I will typically call him and ask. So I'm lucky enough that he answers my call. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So anyway, here's some of the things we get a lot. First of all, we run through these all the time. First one I always get is, can anyone file a bankruptcy? Is there anything special you have to do to file a bankruptcy? If you're in trouble and you haven't made your mortgage payment and you're looking down the barrel of a foreclosure, can you file a bankruptcy?
It depends.
Typical answer from a bankruptcy attorney. It depends on.
There's a lot of variables. Have you filed bankruptcy within the last 4 years? Have you filed a bankruptcy in the last 8 years? What else do you have going on? Yes, your house may be in foreclosure, but if there are other skeletons in your closet, they may be factors to consider whether or not bankruptcy is the right thing to do.
Well, so the short answer is you need to talk to a bankruptcy attorney and find out if you're a candidate. Yeah?
They need to call me.
Yeah, call them. Well, actually, before we're out the show, we'll get your phone. Actually, let's give it now. What phone number should they call?
661-254-5050.
And if you call that number, you probably won't get Lou. You'll probably get Linda, but Linda's fantastic. Linda is Lou's head of staff, has been forever.
Over 25 years.
Yeah, 25 years. She will tell you that she is not an attorney, but she knows more than most attorneys I've met. She's extraordinary, but she can get you started, and she'll get you in touch with Lou and get your questions answered. Okay, next big question I get all the time. If I file a bankruptcy, will I lose my personal property? You're going to say it depends again because it depends on the bankruptcy.
Well, it depends upon the value of the personal property. It depends upon how you hold it. That's going to be subject to the California state exemption laws.
Okay. So again, you have to talk to an attorney, but in general, you can keep most of your personal property. If it's a primary residence and you don't have any of the other skeletons in the closet, and you've not filed bankruptcy before, you can probably keep most of it.
Yeah, most of those things that you bought on credit that are now sitting in storage facilities or that consume your garage so your car can't park in it, you can actually keep all that stuff.
Okay, now here's the big one, and this is the one that gets us in the most amount of trouble. Does filing a bankruptcy eliminate all of my debts?
It depends.
It depends.
3 for 3.
3 for 3. Any competent attorney is going to tell you it depends on your particular case because you don't want to be answering.
Well, you have student loan issues, sure. Tax issues. If you defrauded someone, that can be a non-dischargeable debt. Well, yeah. Things like that can determine whether or not certain debts are dischargeable or not.
Well, to expound on that question, I did a little research because I like doing research. That sort of thing. Is that good stuff?
Oh, look, that's your Google Law degree.
That's my Google Law degree. It is exactly. So this is the problem we get into all the time with clients because clients, when they're represented by lesser counsel, what happens is they get bad advice or they hear bad advice. They're told if you file a Chapter 7, you don't have to worry about your second mortgage or any of your junior debt or anything else on your house. And that is just flat out wrong. We see this all the time. So the reason this happens, and these are from good sources. I'm not making fun of any of these sources. But the nice people at Find Law, which is a perfectly reputable source.
From Westlaw.
From Westlaw, yes, exactly. Chapter 7 bankruptcy also cancels all debts secured by the home, including mortgages and home equity loans. Furthermore, Chapter 7 goes a step further. Chapter 7 also forgives the homeowner for tax liability for losses the mortgage or home improvement lender incurs as a result of the homeowner's default. It does say you could still lose your home. All of this debt and tax liability forgiveness is great, but note that Chapter 7 will not keep you from losing your home. The problem with this is...
That's a loaded question.
That's a very loaded question, yeah. But it does go on, if you read the entire article, okay. It does go on to explain in great detail what the pitfalls could be. But most people don't do that.
Right.
I just read 2 paragraphs. Most people are only reading the first one.
Right.
And if you only get as far as Chapter 7 forgives the homeowner for tax liability losses, the mortgage... further, Chapter 7 goes a step further. It forgives all your debt. No, it doesn't.
Okay, so here's the thing. A bankruptcy in which you get a discharge discharges you of all your personal obligations. Mm-hmm. When you buy a home, there are a number of documents that you sign.
Of course.
The 2 most important documents you sign, one is a promissory note and one is a deed of trust. Mm-hmm. A promissory note is your personal promise to pay the loan back, right? So because of banking regulations and everything else, they go, Mr. Sherman, we really like you. We trust you. You've got a great radio show.
Who doesn't?
But our shareholders and the regulators say that we need to collateralize or secure that loan by your property, so you sign a deed of trust. So the deed of trust is you're pledging your property to secure the repayment of loan in case you cannot. So what the bankruptcy does is a bankruptcy discharges the promissory note, but the property continues to be liable for the payment of the obligation.
Let me translate. What that means is if you file a bankruptcy, the debt is no longer on you personally, but it is still on your house. Your house still serves as collateral.
Correct.
The upshot of that is Chapter 7 bankruptcy does not protect you from foreclosure. It'll buy you a little bit of time, but it is not a permanent solution. And whether you look at Fine Law, which again is from Westlaw, which is fantastic, Bankrate, or another publication called All Law, it's all pretty much the same thing. They will tell you that a Chapter 7 does all this great stuff, and then you have to read down a little bit further to see what it can really do or not do, and they just don't do a decent enough job doing that. And unfortunately, there are, like in any profession, there are good attorneys, there are bad attorneys, there are more competent and less competent. And if you're filing bankruptcy, and of course every penny counts because you're filing a bankruptcy, and you go to one of these mills that doesn't really do personalized stuff, they sort of rubber stamp things and push them through, you're going to get bad advice.
Well, and this issue, I mean, it may have sounded complicated what I explained, but I do explain it that way to my clients, and I go through it, and after all, for the last 15 years. I'm a contributing author on a treatise on California mortgage and deed of trust, so I do know a little bit about it.
Again, to translate, the book that is written for the Bar Association, when attorneys are members of the bar, and let's say you're a bankruptcy attorney who wants to get into bankruptcy as a defense for foreclosure, there is a book that the bar puts out. And I think it's got 16 authors in it or something like that? There are a bunch of authors, but you're the only one who's actually in practice.
No, there are others, but I do Chapter 7 of a 2-volume treatise, and that is on bankruptcy and foreclosures.
Again, he literally wrote the book on bankruptcy and foreclosures. The book the Bar Association uses, he literally wrote that. I know that's an expression. We like using that great expression, but literally, he wrote the book, or wrote a portion of the book, if you want to be technical about it, on bankruptcy and foreclosure. So he's who you want to talk to. But let's move into some other questions. Because, bad advice is the worst thing. Because if you think a Chapter 7 is going to provide you with a permanent solution to a foreclosure issue, the answer to that is no, it will not.
It will not.
It'll buy you some time. There are different chapters. We're going to talk about that in a second. So here's a perfect lead-in. What are the different different BK chapters, and what are the difference between them?
Really?
Go ahead. It's one of your favorite speeches. Go ahead. I think the public should hear this.
There are 7 bankruptcy chapters.
Mm-hmm.
7, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, and 15. Mm-hmm. Okay. Chapter 9 is a municipality. Mm-hmm. Orange County years ago, school districts, water companies, they can file Chapter 9s, but you as an individual cannot. Chapter 10 is a railroad, and you may like model trains, but you're not running a railroad. Chapter 10s are vestiges of the late 19th century when railroads were filing bankruptcy. Chapter 12, farmers and fishermen. You may like going out and fishing, or you may be growing something in your backyard, but you're not a farmer. Interesting thing there is that in California, even though the farming of weed is legal, the proceeds are illegal, and so you cannot be a grower and file for bankruptcy in California.
That's a specific case for those of you who are listening, and he's a very funny guy, and I like him very much, but you can't call yourself a farmer because you got a warehouse in Acton. It doesn't work that way.
And then Chapter 15 is an international business. I got involved in one a few years ago. That's not anybody who's here either, so that leaves 7, 11, and 13. Mm-hmm. Chapter 11s and Chapter 13s can both be filed by individuals. Most people know Chapter 11s by corporations. The most recent in the newspapers, of course, is Bed Bath & Beyond, mm-hmm. which is a liquidating Chapter 11, which means they close everything down, sell everything off. But individuals can file Chapter 11s if their debt exceeds a certain amount of money. And Chapter 11s are reorganizations. Chapter 13s are only for individuals, and it requires them to make their regular monthly mortgage payments, mm-hmm. plus all their other household expenses, plus they need to contribute their disposable income to the Chapter 13 trustee, who uses that to pay back a plan payment, which usually includes the arrearages on a mortgage, so they can save the house.
And the two most common are?
Chapters for individuals, 7
7
and
and
7 and 13. Chapter 7 is a straight liquidation, and you walk away from everything.
Yeah, the biggest difference here is that Chapter 7, please correct me if I'm wrong, Chapter 7 is a liquidation. In other words, bank, creditors, I got what I got. We split it up among the creditors. We all go our separate ways. We start over. And again, a Chapter 7, which is the most common, also the quickest, is not going to protect your house from foreclosure. A Chapter 13, on the other hand, is a reorganization. With a reorganization, it will save your house. But
if you make all your payments.
Well, yeah, of course you have to make the payment. So talk to me a little bit. If let's say I'm a homeowner and my house is in foreclosure and I file a Chapter 13, what does that kind of look like for that homeowner? How does that work as far as him or her being able to save me being able to save my house?
Yeah, you propose a plan. Okay, and that plan is based upon your disposable income, which is the difference between your net after-tax income and your monthly living expenses. So let's say that you've got $500 left over. Mm-hmm. That's your disposable income. That goes into your plan. But what we need to do is we reverse engineer everything because we need to know what you need for disposable income to make your plan payments.
Yeah. Again, competent counsel versus bills. Yeah, so in other words, you can get into a Chapter 13, you can get the plan approved, you can make the payment through the plan.
3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years, and that will get you out of trouble. It'll take 3 to 5 years. And in that case, you're making your regular mortgage payment plus whatever the arrears amount is on a 3 to 5 year plan.
Correct.
And then once you get through that plan, you're back on track, you saved your house, you're good.
Yeah.
Also, one of the other things we get a lot is if I file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the bank cannot foreclose on me. If I file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, the bank cannot foreclose on me. And that is simply not true. It provides what's called, automatic stay.
Automatic stay.
Yeah. And a lender, however, can void that automatic stay by asking the court to do so, by asking the court for relief from the stay.
Right.
And then if they get that granted, which most of the time they do.
Well, in Chapter 13, relief from stay will not be granted if the debtor is engaged in a Chapter 13 where plan payments are being made, including the mortgage payments.
So if you're making your payment, you're good. Now,
right.
in a Chapter 7, they'll
Chapter 7, they'll file a relief from stay. Now, the test there is that if there is more than a 20% equity cushion, which means the difference between what the lender is owed and what the value of the property is, then the bankruptcy court may not grant relief from stay and may tell the lender, no, you're going to have to wait until the case winds its way through until the trustee files a no asset report and the case closes.
I didn't know that. All these years, I learned something. That's fantastic. Here, I'm supposed to be here to teach other people something, and I learned something too. So if you guys are listening, we both got to learn. Let's move on to another question. I love this question. This is a staff question because they're trying to game this. I love kids who are trying to game the system. I love it because that's what good things. That's how they find things. But this is just not that. Anyway, can a homeowner avoid foreclosure by repeatedly filing a bankruptcy? I need like that question. Well, in fairness to the person who asked me this question, I love my staff to death. This is one of these where, well, if a bankruptcy prevents a foreclosure, why can't I just keep filing bankruptcy?
Okay, so we call those serial filings, not like cereal that you get from Quaker Oats, but cereal like anything else. SERIAL. And what that means is that you file repetitive filings. And what happens is that those become bad faith filings. And this is not our first rodeo. Judge is not our first rodeo. And you can see them a mile away. And so sometimes what happens is that people think, aha, I can game the system. I will transfer a fractional interest in my property to someone else, and they'll file.
Oh, there are whole companies that go to people and say, "Do this. Put a portion of your house in my name, and that way you can." Yeah.
So these are not new. I think we first started seeing these back in 1984, 85 when I was clerking for bankruptcy judges. We started seeing these serial filings and started kind of trying to get ahead of them and prevent the effect of them.
So when I was in junior high, you were starting to do this, is basically what you're saying.
Okay.
All right. I'm just trying to make the point that you've been doing this for a long time and that you're older than me.
Yes, but people think that we're brothers. I say we're brothers from other mothers.
That's bad enough, but people think that I'm older than you are, and that's the part I just don't like. I'm fine.
Because I shaved my beard.
Well, that's the reason. You have fewer wrinkles than me. I'm fine if people think that you and I are related. I couldn't. That's fantastic.
It's a lot of fun.
But the people think I'm older kills me. That part just kills me.
It's okay.
I tell you what, why don't we go, because I want to keep you for the third segment, if you don't mind, Stan, because I got a good question for you. When we come back, we're going to talk about something I'm sure everybody wants to hear about, which is basically how do you use a bankruptcy to take debt away from your house? Like we talked about, you can file a bankruptcy and your mortgage debt will be removed from you, but it'll still be on the house. However, there is, under certain circumstances, we're going to ask Lou about that because you pioneered this. There is a way to get mortgage debt taken off of your house, removed from your house in a bankruptcy. So why don't we do a couple commercials? We'll hear from some of our sponsors. We come back, we're going to talk about that. So please stay tuned in because you're going to want to hear this part. This is how you make a bankruptcy work for you if you meet these criteria. It'd be a very, very good thing. We've seen it save lots and lots of people and get them out of trouble. Again, I'm Rich Szerman. This is the Real Estate Fix with Rich. You're at 98.1 KHTS, your hometown station, or AM 1220. Oh, thank you guys for tuning back in. You're going to like this part of the show. For those of you who hung out, all of you I hope hung out, you're going to like this because this is really good. This is going to be fun. With our special in-studio guest today is Lou Esbin, preeminent bankruptcy attorney and a long-standing friend of mine. Definitely somebody you want to talk to if you're in financial trouble. But actually, what is that? Give me that number again. What's the number for your office again? Let's do that again.
661-254-5050, and the website is esbinlaw.com.
Yeah, so if you have a problem...
ESBINLAW.com.
If you have a problem, we'll also get your information up on the site here at the station. But if you have a problem, you can call me. I'll get you in touch with Lou. You can call Lou directly. If you have a bankruptcy question, if you have bankruptcy issues, he is absolutely the guy you talk to. I have, 200 or 300 cases in my office at any given time usually. We're down a little lower than that now. And I will tell you, I get propositioned by that sounds horrible. I get advertisements from bankruptcy attorneys. I get called by bankruptcy attorneys all the time because of what I do, because we do it for free. We have a large group of clientele. A lot of them have to file bankruptcy. So I get stuff from other bankruptcy attorneys all the time. And I will tell you, the only one I recommend is Lou. And the reason for that is because he's that good at what he does.
Thank you.
So let's get into the fun part. This is the part I most wanted to talk about today. What is lien stripping?
Well, lien stripping is a misnomer.
Okay.
Okay.
So I already started off strong.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think the first time I did it was in 1994. I figured out a kind of a loophole in the law, and I started doing it. And then in 2008, it really became prevalent.
Well, yeah.
And it's a motion to value, but it became commonly referred to as lien stripping. And what happens only in a Chapter 13 case and only in a Chapter 11 case is that you value if the value of the property is less than the amount owing on the debt, the secured debt, the first. Then what you do is you file a motion to value the property, get an appraisal done, and you prove up, and evidence is very important, you prove up to the court that the value of the property is less than the amount owing on the first. What that means is that as a matter of law, and the case is In re Smith, and I was appellant counsel in that case, so that was my appellate case.
So those of you who are attorneys who are listening, you can look that up. For the rest of you, it just means he knows what he's talking about.
So what happens is that in a Chapter 13 case or a Chapter 11 case of individuals, the court will say that the property is worth, let's say, $700,000. The amount on the first is $600,000, so it's $100,000. No, wait. The value of the property is $600,000, and the loan is $650,000, so it's $50,000 underwater. And the second, let's say, is $250,000, is now wholly unsecured
because the first would take up any value in the property.
Correct. And so in the Chapter 13 plan or in the Chapter 11 plan, what will happen is that as long as all of the plan payments are made to the first, and anyone else for that matter, and the discharge is then entered, then the court will order that the second lien should be removed from the property because it was unsecured or wholly undersecured for purposes of bankruptcy, and that's how you remove a second from the property, or is commonly referred to as lien stripping. But it does not occur at the time that the court enters the order valuing the property. It occurs when the discharge is entered.
At the end of the bankruptcy. In other words, to translate, if you owe more on your first mortgage than the house is worth, you can file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy and wipe out the second. Now, a couple of things you have to do there. First of all, you have to have an attorney who knows how to do this. You have to have an attorney who knows how to prepare it, et cetera, et cetera. I think going to the guy who started, that's probably a good way to go. But so yeah, if you owe more on the first loan than the house is worth, and that you can include costs, and we argue about constantly, because when this became the court ignores the idea that if you sell your house for X amount, you have to reduce by about 7 to 8% because you're paying costs and commissions and everything else. So it's the what is the value of the house versus what is the amount owed on the house on the first mortgage.
Correct.
And if you owe more on the first mortgage than the house is worth, and you can prove that, then you can file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy and wipe out the junior debt. You can wipe out the second. It won't be attached to you. It won't be attached to the house. It just goes away.
And we had this in 2008 after that whole meltdown, where the conflict was that people were saying, I need to sell my house, or they were being told, well, you can do a short sale. And I was saying, no, do a Chapter 13. You'll be in for 5 years. After 5 years, you'll wipe out the second. You'll get rid of the other debt that you have. You'll still be in the market because on the seventh day, God rested and stopped making property in California. And you will have your property, and you'll be without the debt. And if cycles are correct, in 5 years, the value will be up. People didn't listen, and they did short sales, and they came out of the market. And a lot of them never went back into the market, and you know that.
Yeah, well,
or they'd file Chapter 7s because they would give them poor advice, and now they're coming back to you and I with their zombie seconds.
Yeah, that's also what creates a zombie second. A zombie second is where you have a debt against your house that you think has been wiped out that comes back to life to eat your equity. That's why we call them zombies. And not knowing how to handle this stuff, or worse yet, having counsel who doesn't know how to handle this stuff, creates zombie seconds. That has created a whole cottage industry of buying these things up. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again, I'm sure. Yeah. I stand in opposition to that entire industry. Yep. I think it's wholly unethical and immoral. Yep. To have a debt go bad for 10, in one case, the longest we had is 17 years. The bank hadn't seen a payment for 17 years, and now a new bank comes along and says, give us the money you owed, plus all the accrued interest, over 17 years, which is a ton, or we take your house 90 days from now.
And in that instance, a Chapter 13 often doesn't work because the borrower doesn't have, the homeowner doesn't have the ability to pay all those accrued payments back over a 5-year period of time. Yeah. So this all became very frustrating. Both you and I worked through all of this. So this is where people really need to, before anything ever happens, for God's sakes, it's an information session with us that gives them information, and they may never need to file bankruptcy, but the value of information is critical.
Well, of course. Well, there's a big difference between finding out what your options are and actually filing a bankruptcy. Yeah. I tell clients all the time, and I know you do as well, that's the kind of thing that if you're in trouble, you want to discuss it, you want to talk to the people you need to talk to, you want to find the experts, you want to have that in your hip pocket. Mm-hmm. And if you need it, it's there. I mean, that is the classic example of I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Yeah. Because we see all the time people come in and you look at the file and you go, my goodness, if 5 years ago I'd been on the phone with you for 5 to 10 minutes, you would not be in this problem now.
Now, with the valuation of the properties and lien strippings, we may not be seeing those right away because of how prices have gone up. Yeah, and also the exemptions for homestead exemptions went from $100,000 to $600,000. Yeah. So we're in a different environment today than we were in 2008.
I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about homestead exemptions a little bit, because I think that's something that people really talk about. In the last few minutes, I'd like to go over that. Yeah, we got a little bit of time. Tell them what a homestead exemption is.
So the states, each state has a different scheme for exemptions. California, back 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, changed the homestead exemption from $100,000 for a couple to $600,000,
which is long overdue.
That is a cosmic shift. Yeah. And so what it means is that if you have a house that's worth $1 million and you have a loan against it for $700,000, you have a $300,000 homestead exemption. So you can file a Chapter 7, and the trustee won't sell your property because you've got your homestead exemption. Whereas before the law changed, if you had a house worth $1 million and you owed $700,000, you wouldn't file a Chapter 7 because you only had $100,000 homestead exemption.
Well, you'd lose your house.
You can lose your house.
In a lot of cases.
Right. So that's the homestead exemption. Mm-hmm. It's very important to understand. Then there's subtle nuances between a statutory homestead exemption, statutory homestead exemption, and a recorded homestead exemption. Okay. I'm not going to get into that.
It's a little too technical for this. But again, the idea is If you have a homestead exemption, it's automatic. You don't have to file them anymore. I haven't had to have them
You
file
have
them for
statutory
15
home
years. Yeah, so it's
statutory
automatic.
homestead.
You can use that exemption to protect yourself because the state has said if you own a home, you can protect up to $600,000 in equity in that home.
It's a little more complicated, but that's a
That's
good. This is LA County.
Well, I'm here to make it simple.
Right.
That's you handle the complicated stuff. That's why you have the law degree. If you haven't noticed, those of you who listen regularly, I have lots of people surrounding me in my life that have law degrees except me. So I'm always kind of the shortest one at the basketball game, as it were. But that's okay because they tell me stuff and I sound like I know what I'm doing. Anyway, right. So the upshot of all of this is, and this this seems like such common sense, but if you are even a little bit of trouble, just make a call. Nobody's going to charge you for answering a couple of your questions. There's nothing wrong with looking at the internet if you want to do that, but as we just demonstrated, some of these really quite fine sites Westlaw is one of your preeminent sources for anything having to do with the law.
We charge $100 for a consultation, and that's been like that for 20 years.
Yeah, we argue about that all the time. But that's okay.
And so that's I think that's just a small buy-in.
Well, the idea is because you want to make sure that it's purposeful.
Yeah.
It's not just, you have to separate at some point from just talking to some guy on the internet or talking to some guy on the corner to somebody who's an actual professional. And that actually, it kind of has a way of self-righting the ship, as it were.
It does.
Yeah. So, anyway, the upshot of all of this is if you're in trouble of any sort, or if you have a friend who's in trouble, just call. You can call me, you can call Lou. There are all sorts of sources out there. But I'll give you, again, my personal cell phone number, 661-714-1400, and that is my personal cell phone. If I don't answer, please send me a text. I've gotten a few who are on the air here, and I appreciate that. I'll return all those as soon as we're off the air. But yeah, you can reach me at that, or you can reach Lou at
661-254-5050.
So please call if you're in trouble. We do this. You answer questions for free. If you need a consultation, that's different. You'll go meet with them. But I am happy to help. I'm sure Lou is as well. Let's wrap up the show because I think we're running out of time. And I'm actually going to hit my heart out for the first time ever. My name is Rich Szerman. This is The Fix with Rich Szerman. Our special guest today has been Lou Esbin. If you have questions, give us a call. You've been listening to The Real Estate Fix with Rich on KHTS 98.1 AM 1220, your hometown station.